First, it is important to have plans in place for dealing with potential crisis. For an organization of this size, that means lots of potential issues in any number of national and international arenas. There needs to be a framework for application of the various types of issues that can be adapted to numerous arenas. Advocating is what you guys do well, but CPA offers a framework to get a little creative and advocate in new ways. This is a useful tool that can further the various missions of the Gates Foundation. Exercise caution. These are great pieces of advice, but huge blunders can occur with these areas of public relations, so be sure to carefully consider all of these efforts in the grand scheme of things before proceeding with actual action. Ethical public relations takes effort, even for an ethical, do-good organization such as the Gates Foundation. It cannot just assume that their efforts are ethical because they have the highest good at the center of their intent. So what constitutes ethical public relations? Bowen provides us with 7 great examples of how to practice public relations ethically. These include collaborative decision-making, listening and appreciating, social value and meaning, dialogue and responsiveness, managing competition and conflict, responsibility and autonomy. Another point Bowden makes is that organizations need ethical leadership if they are to uphold the rigorous demands of ethical public relations. An organization like the Gates Foundation is built with values in mind. That is why it should be no surprise that values in communications matter. In fact, people do not want just cold hard statistics anymore. They want to have information that is presented to them in a way that agrees with their sense of self. Let the 7 aspects of public relations guide your efforts. Listen to all impacted parties with a sense of mutual respect. Include them in decision-making process. Respect the inherent rights of people. Seek to engage your audiences and stakeholders. Manage conflict and competition in a way that is honorable and not self-serving. Be responsible and respect everyone's right to choose. These principles will give you a pretty strong moral and ethical foundation to conduct your efforts. If you are to really uphold these principles in all that you have and all that you do, you need to have a strong leadership culture with ethics at the forefront of their efforts. Lastly, to better relate to people, take the underlying structure of self, including values, attitudes, identities, morals, culture, and all those complex things. You then take your messages and layer it over these bones. This approach leads to a decreased likelihood of message rejection. Now, you may be thinking that your organization obviously stands for something, and social responsibility is your specialty. But you need to remind people regularly of your mission and what it is you stand for. According to their study of public expectations of CSR communication, Kim and Ferguson were able to glean the following about current public attitudes regarding organization social responsibility and information sharing with audiences. Publics expect to be communicated with about your social responsibility efforts, and you are not serving your purpose if you do not garner support and response from the public for your efforts. This being said, you need to be candid about the positives and negatives of your efforts. People want to hear the successes and failures of what you're doing. It adds dynamic to the story and keeps your audience engaged. Speaking of storytelling, use your compelling stories and efforts to keep audiences engaged. Follow the beneficiaries and document the outcomes. Move your audiences by tapping into the amazing stories waiting for you where you are doing your most compelling work. Genuine communication is essential to CSR efforts. Publics want to be communicated with by your organization about the good you are doing, but this can be difficult. It is important to include setbacks and be forthwith about all highlights of your efforts. Do not make your communications about you. Usually people do not want to hear about CSR from a CEO or spokesperson. Mr. and Mrs. Gates are a likely exception to this rule, but for the most part, you want to talk about participants, those who are benefiting from your efforts. Again, Tell the stories of those who are benefiting from your efforts. That's what people want most. Today, the world is better connected than ever before, and even small organizations can gain international audiences. Global and cultural boundaries are fewer and farther between, and everyone needs to be well equipped to deal with these differences. There are many gaps in theoretical knowledge of public relations international practice. It is important to know that these are under development. This is especially important for this foundation, which does a lot of international work. These concerns are voiced in numerous evaluations of public relations literature and are becoming more obvious as organizations of every kind find themselves vulnerable to international audiences and scrutiny within the digital world. Oh dear. Sorry. Further, much of the existing works are Western-centric, which means they do not take into consideration the complexities of international audiences and remote cultures that this organization works with. First, if you're going to engage in public relations across the globe with countries or countless cultures, you need a framework for public relation activities that can be applied by practitioners for their intended audiences in any number of eclectic situations. You need to take into consideration influencing factors in each of your various arenas. These include, but are not limited to, culture, politics, economy, media systems, activism, and public diplomacy. Practitioners need to be trained to recognize and adjust for each of these factors. When in doubt, branch out. When you find public relations research is lacking in certain global fashion, look to other fields to find a better understanding of particulars of a situation and how best to address them. First, leadership is essential to public relations. A strong leader is one who will make or break public relations efforts. This needs to be considered for the Gates Foundation at various levels, both geographically and project-wise. Studies indicate that the characteristics of an effective leader will be overall strategic decision-making capabilities, problem-solving and results production, in-depth knowledge, and communication expertise. Qualities that contribute to a leadership excellence are work experience, individual initiative, and a history of strong role models. Distinct features to look for are a compelling vision for an organization or a particular mission, comprehensive knowledge about information systems and media, along with the ability to strategically create messages. Another key takeaway here is that leaders engage their employees. This means working to forge positive relationships and encourage employee engagement. Internal public relations can nurture positive relationships and environments. Strong leaders are important for any organization, but the Gates Foundation has a multitude of projects that need to have individualized attention. There needs to be strong leadership in public relations for each project and then regionally as well as up the ladder. One key point that there needs to be vision. Make sure to match your leaders with their passion projects so they can put their drive and vision into efforts of your organization to get the most from them and your organizational efforts. Remember that leadership should also practice internal public relations. They should seek to engage employees to improve their relationships and overall work environment. Keep in mind, internal successes can also lay the foundation for future external efforts. Transparency is something many organizations struggle with, but it is not about being anything more, or is not about anything more than being more visible. This means being active in participation with publics. An organization can be evaluated for transparency by the organizational aspects of integrity and respect and the communication aspects of openness. Public relation efforts can also be measured. You want to aim for participation, substantial information, and accountability. The fourth measurement is included, and it is that of secrecy. This is a measurement against an organization, and they should aim not to be secretive, as it is the opposite of transparency. Both of these are important because organizations itself and public relations efforts need to operate in a transparent fashion if the organization is to truly reach a high degree of transparency. Authenticity is about acting in accordance to the true nature of an organization. This is an important part of transparency. It reinforces the audience relationship and is established in part through audience interactions. In order to be transparent, you must be authentic. It is important to review the founding ideologies of the Gates Foundation to better establish your authentic identity. Make sure to remember that authenticity is also an important part, a collaborative thing established by interaction with audiences. Measure your organization for organizational transparency. You need to do this at regular intervals and set goals to track organizational transparency and transparency growth over time. The same thing should be done organization-wide for all public relations efforts. Evaluation should be done at local levels and then regional levels and reviewed at the highest level. This could identify areas where improvement is needed at various levels of the organization. Public relations theory has a lot of uses, even for an organization with such a long-standing reputation as the Gates Foundation. From applications at the organizational level, to ethical communication practices, to strategic communication efforts, public relations theory should be applied at all levels of organization from leadership to local levels. It should be turned inward and from the internal public relations to improve organization and be conducted at the highest ethical standing. Doing these things will further the Gates Foundation's many amazing missions and help make the world a better place. Thank you, and I hope you have a wonderful day and that you enjoyed this presentation.